Okay, we're now streaming on YouTube. And see, I'm starting the recording, even though there's only a few of us.
I will open the Grand County Council regular meeting. It is July 21st, 2020. It is 1:53. We have a quorum of council people here. Greg Halliday, Mary McGann, Gabriel Wojtek, Evan Clapper. We also have our county clerk, Quinn Hall, and our assistant county administrator, Mallory Nassau. We will begin with canvass of the election. Quinn?
You bet. So the election on June 30th, as you know, we've completed the canvass now as of today. We had 11 precincts reporting. We sent out 2,035 ballots. We got back 1,389 ballots for a total of 68.26% response. The state sent us a list of 14 ballots they wanted audited and 14 signatures they wanted audited. We've matched all those up and found 0 issues. So it was painless. In the era of COVID, we completed an election that was relatively painless. So,
Okay.
if you want the numbers, I can give the numbers. What else?
I would accept a motion to accept what would the motion read? To accept the canvas as presented. Could I have such a motion?
So moved, Mary.
Motion by Greg Halliday. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Evan Clapper. Discussion.
I looked at it. It looked pretty good to me.
I will call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. So we have completed the canvas and we will be getting electronic signatures. Correct, Gwen?
Yes, we do need to get electronic signatures. So this has to be transmitted to the state by close of business tonight. So sometime between now and realistically 4, so that we can get it scanned and uploaded to the state. I need to get signatures of 5 council members. And I believe Greg has already been in and signed. So we need 4 more council members to sign this. And electronically is totally fine. I've checked with the state. They said that's fine. So Mallory can send this around via email and we need 4 more signatures.
So we should be expecting it on email any moment, right, Mallory?
Yes, I will send an email when I've sent it out and then let you know what the link will be titled.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks to Mallory for setting that up. That was awesome.
Mary?
Yes.
Yeah, I dropped by the county today and signed in person, so.
Okay, so if myself, Evan, and Gabriel sign it, that's 4. We'll need a 5th.
Yes,
correct?
we will need a 5th. We will, yes.
Okay. So hopefully Jaylyn or someone shows up soon. Okay,
Awesome.
we
Thanks,
are. We are to our Grand County Planning Commission workshop. Workshop on Planning Commission Small Area Plan for 2020. Emily Campbell and Mia Dunbar Irwin.
Hi there. I'm not sure if Emily's here yet or not, but she should be here in just a minute. I just want to make sure, did everybody get the workshop packet and or the folder link? And were you all able to look that over a little bit? Okay, great. So I am probably going to be screen sharing if possible. I don't know if Mallory, you can allow me to do that. It says that our screen share is
Give me 1 second. I think I have to change something quickly. Mila, can you check and see if it will let you share now?
Yes. Thank you. I might wait a minute and let Emily arrive, and then she can introduce our process, and then I'll be able to host some of those documents for you.
There she is.
Hello. Can y'all hear me? Yes, wonderful, thank you.
Looks like some more of the planning commissioners are coming, but we can go ahead and get started if you want to, Emily.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how many commissioners are going to make it, but they all have the invitation. So great. Well, thanks everyone for this time. The way that Mila and I wanted to just provide some structure for this is, set our intent. What are we trying to get out of it? Let Mila kind of tee off the different sections that we want to go deep on, and then save time for open conversation, questions, discussion if we need it. And then Mary, I don't know if you wanted to interject anything at the top either. So otherwise I'll just kick off into our intent. All right. So in a moment, Mila's going to run through the timeline that we have for this process, but we have, as part of this, set aside 2 times for workshops with you all. This one to make sure we're aligned now so that we catch any gotchas or red flags that could trip us up later. And then one in about a month to make sure that we're reviewing the work and staying aligned as we're going into the drafting process. Now, what we want to get out of today is a couple things. So we want to review our process. How are we going about ensuring adequate citizen involvement and citizen comment given our remote atmosphere? This is something that several council members raised when we brought this up at the council meeting. So we'll review the survey we sent out, the timing, any groups that we're reaching out to. We want to hear from you what stakeholder groups we may be missing, and just make sure that you're comfortable with the approach we're taking to outreach. We want to explore how detailed versus how visionary we want this to be, keeping in mind that at some point in the future, ideally, we have an opportunity to revisit our general plan, and we can always come back and add more details or revise this small area plan as a part of that process. So Mila's going to walk through a few different examples of different ways other communities have approached small area plans, sort of just the mental model for the purpose of this type of process, and making sure that we're all on the same page. We also would love to go through the survey we've sent out and kind of hear your responses to it, or at least hear some discussion about it, to gauge you as elected officials where you sit reflecting the community. And then if we have time, we'll dive into some specifics, but what we don't want to do at this time is go really, really deep on specific, code standards and things like that. So we'll keep a running list going of things we need to come back to, but we don't want to diverge into that in the bulk of this time. Last thing is, as far as how we're hoping you all will think about this, you've had several applications come before you for this area that have come through the Planning Commission. There will likely be more. If there's one that's just sort of pending. If you were to have this application or an application for this area in front of you tomorrow or today, I guess, literally, what are the types of questions you have? What are the things that you would like to see reflected in this type of planning process so that you can make and feel comfortable with making adequate decisions about individual applications and a larger vision for this area. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mila to make sure that, one, I didn't forget anything that I was going to try and say, and to just give a little bit of an overview about this process, our timeline, and then introduce the process that we're taking in order to get citizen comment.
Sure, thanks, Emily. So I'm gonna, okay. Well, I was going to share my screen, but they're all showing up with little emergency triangles. So maybe that's not going to happen.
I can share mine. I can pop
Okay,
that up.
that'd be
Give me one
great. I don't know why that's happening. So I was just going to put up the schedule. So basically, we started this process on June 8th. The Planning Commission did. I know we had a meeting with County Council before that to get the go-ahead. We have taken a little while to get our public survey ready to go. The Planning Commission worked on a shared document to figure out what exactly it was that we wanted to know from the public. And then we have a Survey Monkey ready for, well, it's ready for distribution. We've posted it on Facebook, and we are probably going to be printing postcards as well to mail out to everyone. We would encourage everyone to send it to as many people as you can think of if you would like to engage with your stakeholders in particular. And as part of this meeting, we're also hoping to identify any particular stakeholder groups that we want to reach out to individually. After that, we are hoping to have another workshop with that public comment incorporated, again with council. And so hopefully that would be somewhere near the end of August. And then we're going to start working on drafting the plan. So we did start out, we started out with a pretty ambitious schedule. It looks like we're, maybe a little bit about a month behind, maybe not. So we'll see where we end up in the end, but we're still shooting for, before the end of the year. If we can adopt this plan, that would be perfect. And, I think just to mention that the sort of urgency here on the timing is that, like Emily mentioned, we are getting applications for this area, and it only seems fair to applicants and to the public to be able to have something to tell them about their property and what we want to see there as soon as possible. So with that, we can move forward to look at what we're actually faced with.
Really quick, just to the council members, just so we're kind of checking our boxes. Does this timeline still feel right to anybody? Any concerns about this? Anything that you don't see reflected in this schedule that you would expect to be there?
I have a question. And not that you can plan for these kinds of things, but it is a reality of the situation. We have one of the applicants has, expressed to council more or less the time frames and time constraints he's dealing with on one of the properties that he's got under contract, which is I think the Willow Springs. It's and I don't know if there's been any discussion around that. I'll offer my opinion is that, there's the saying that, well, we can't plan, public policy and land use around one specific circumstance, but the reality of the situation is that it sounds like, the current underlying zoning is there, and a lot of what drove this planning process, was that application and that campground. That was what spurred the idea from council to hit pause and evaluate, or hit pause and take the time to develop a long-term plan. And I don't know if folks are aware of that, if council members are aware, or staff, that applicant may very well go away, and that there may be another use that's already allowed for, on that property. And one of the reasons that I'm sensitive to that is it's not just existing landowners that have zoning applied to their property that can be hurt when we kind of change the rules out from underneath them. But when we have a zone there, with a land use table, and somebody pursues a piece of property and they go under contract and they're performing due diligence, and then you change the rules during that process, both of those parties are hurt by that, and that costs people money, and it's not that's something that should be avoided if possible. And so I'm looking at the time frame here for adoption December 1st. I think initially what I was told was a 3 to 4 month time frame, and you know, I think that decision was made at least a month ago, if not more than a month ago. So now we're talking about a 7 to 8 month time frame, you know, when we had indicated that it was going to be much shorter than that. And so I'd be curious just to hear from others on that and kind of understand their perspective, because I guess just the assumption that all of the current landowners and operators are going to be in the same circumstance at the tail end of this process, if this is the timeline, is not the case.
So I'd love to hear from other county council members. I will say that on the meeting that we brought this in front of the county council, the direction that we got was by the end of the year. And given the known staffing limit constraints that we had in the planning department, you know, that was where we landed on this timeline, and accelerated so that we could aim for an early December adoption, giving us some space if we needed it in order to deal with possible delays so that it wouldn't go into the new year. So I will just, for context, say that. And I guess the only other thing is, part of this question is how detailed and how specific we want this plan to be. And there's no moratorium in place here. This is a guiding process to help us make recommendations effectively to you, and for you to make effective decisions on behalf of the county. And if having a more general and high level plan is enough for you all to feel comfortable starting to make those decisions, you know, we have an adoption process outlaid here, but it's also a living process. So you'll be able to react in real time to that, and approach applications as they come before you, how you all see fit. So, I mean, from a planning commissioner's perspective, I think that's just some context to ask you to guide us on how specific we should be getting. But I'd be curious
Sure.
to hear other council people react to.
I'll weigh in on the question of the timeline. Can you guys hear me all right? I can't see what's going on my end.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So the application that Curtis is referencing, there's kind of two that recently came up. Both were requesting zone changes and up zones. And he's right that you know, people that are going to speculate in land development are investing monies and investing times. And I think that it's worth addressing that in a timely manner. But it's not like these guys have been sitting on this property for generations with a plan in place that was moving forward. So this, you know, to put it in perspective, this was to address those recent requests for up zones. And I think that working under this timeline is actually pretty fast. And the reason that, you know, we didn't make those, sorry about the neighbor's dogs. Sorry, we didn't apply those high density housing, or sorry, the overnight accommodations overlay at the time was because we did want more community input about the vision for that zone. I think that this timeline is good. I think that having it by the end of the year would be pretty fast. I think with recognizing that, that's going to kind of limit us from getting down to the real nitty gritty of what's going on out there. And really what I would like to achieve is kind of having some community buy-in for any potential changes that are out there. We got a lot of response that the community was not interested in more overnight accommodations. And so right out of the gate, we get an application for more overnight accommodations. And I'd just like to have a little footing from the community, a little guidance from the community of how to move forward. And so I think it's important that we take time to gather that and to put this vision and the goals and the plan in place. And I think end of the year is ambitious, but but looking at this timeline here, it looks like we'd be able to do it, and so I would encourage, you know, that those 5 planning commission meetings are used effectively, that we have time for legal review, and that you know, the public hearings for both the planning commission and the county council have buy-in, because I wouldn't be surprised if you know, come November when those hearings are happening, there might be some more edits that come down the pipe. So I'd like to kind of get to that place so we could have something in hand by the end of the year. And I'm not too worried about rushing it to accommodate zoning change requests. To Curtis's point, you know, if people are wanting to do things that are currently approved by the zoning, I mean, that's, I'm not trying to pull the rug out from under anybody when it comes to that. And that's just part of the nature of the beast.
So just, I mean, really quickly, I can understand that. I mean, I've understood kind of where you're coming from the beginning, Evan. I guess the two things is that what makes it really difficult is we didn't decide to start planning until people came forward. That's never a good process, to have zoning in place, have people make plans, spend savings on earnest money deposits, hire engineers, and then all of a sudden say, oh, never mind, we don't want that. I mean, that's just the reality of how people are impacted. We're not going to fix that now. The second thing is let's just say theoretically, the Willow Springs gentleman, his project is not financeable because he doesn't have his entitlements in place. He falls out of contract, and the person behind him wants to put in a big truck stop. And a big truck stop, I would assume, is probably not gonna, I didn't see a space for that, you know, in the survey. That's probably not something that the planning commission or that the powers that be are gonna find desirable. So I guess the point that I'm making is I would, if those realities are indeed factual, I don't think it's in our best interest to ignore those things, because you know, what would be the sake of planning if somebody's going to come in and just ram home proposals that are already allowed for while we're sitting around planning, I guess, you know, and can those be avoided? Not that we're trying to place some kind of unrealistic expectation without regard for resources and staff time, but it seems like the pragmatically the realities of at least one of these applicants that's kind of spurred this discussion doesn't seem to fit with this timeline, and it's a concern for me, because I would like to see both that party and the county develop a plan that works for everybody without someone being burned and without someone coming in and putting something in place that doesn't fit with the planning that's happening.
So respectfully, I think if we move forward, we'll have a chance to look at the underlying zoning and also look at what we've asked the community and ensure that we are making sure we're capturing these potential use cases, and can also talk a little bit about the different types of applications we've seen. So I'd love for us to just continue on a little bit and then come back to this if we need to.
And I would be, can you guys, okay, good. I also just wanted to say that, you know, so we looked at this timeline from the standpoint of actually looking at meeting dates. And this leaves us about, I believe, 8 weeks or less to actually write the plan, including gathering public comment and getting the workshop with county council and having discussions at planning commission. And to be honest, I don't think that it would do the Grand County any justice to have a planning effort that was shorter than that. I don't think that we would be including enough public comment, you know, allowing people enough time to be involved. I don't think that it would be enough time for us to make an actual thoughtful plan. And if you'll notice, what we have a 4-week minimum legal review as part of this timeline. We also have noticing requirements as part of this timeline. And there's really no way around either one of those. We have to notice both the public hearing at the Planning Commission and at the County Council. And that takes us about 6 weeks all told. And then you add in the legal review, and that's another 10 weeks. And that's just part of the code and the process of adopting a plan that we absolutely can't get around. So the only thing that we would really be discussing as far as speeding up the plan is reducing time for public comment.
So
All
that
right.
probably is a good time to turn over to how we are. I'm gonna pull up my notes really quick. So talking through the process, let's just tap on the survey. I can pull that up and just talk about how we're getting citizen comment, if that works.
Yeah, so for now, planning commissioners worked on, I think it's not in here, it's actually just in the folder in your email. Planning commissioners worked on crafting questions, and I think we would love some input from council as far as what you're looking for as well from public comment. So this was our one of our first efforts, and so far we have it on SurveyMonkey. Like I said, we are trying to identify other stakeholder groups that we'd like to reach out to individually. There was discussion about whether or not an in-person meeting would be appropriate. And at this point, we decided we were uncomfortable with that. So there's nothing planned at the moment. I think, we're still considering the possibility of, an outdoor kind of on-site field trip, something maybe meet up at Bar M or something like that, so people can actually come out and see what we're talking about. But at the moment, we're really focusing on getting the survey and getting public comment in. So I think staff and Planning Commission, we would be really interested to hear if you have any more stakeholder groups that you'd like us to reach out to individually. And, of course, please contact whoever you would like to have comments from, and have them email our department if they're going to be written comments, or just take the survey or give us a call, and we'll just be collecting those for the record.
I haven't noticed a link on the CED's social media stuff. Maybe that would be possible.
It should be, actually.
I don't know if there's I might have missed it. I'm not a big social media guy, but possibly an ad in the local newspapers too, with links to the survey.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Would think sending it to, has it been sent to the Chamber of Commerce and organizations like that?
Yes, we sent it out to the Community and Economic Development business list, which includes the chamber. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And one of the people listening in have posted a link to what I assume is the place where it's been noticed by the planning department on Facebook. So thank you.
Yeah, we put it out as an ad to get boosted, and Facebook rejected it. So we are working on figuring out why that ad was rejected. Social media can be oddly challenging. We also do have a new web page on the Community and Economic Development general page, so you can direct people there as well.
Right. So we're 23 minutes in, and want to just put a pin in this really quick. As far as the open questions that council may want to continue to discuss related to scope and such, making sure we are adequately approaching the community and stakeholder groups. Any additional comments of things that we need to be taking back and talking about or recentering on related to outreach and process? We'll come back to specifics in a moment.
I thought the survey was very comprehensive. I think I took it yesterday or this morning.
Thank you. Planning Commission worked really hard on that to try and make it balanced. Commissioner Kevin Walker drafted it, so props to him for taking that on during pandemic. So what we'd like to discuss next, and I think this could be the bulk of the conversation, is scope. So this is how detailed, what types of details. If we need to, we can get into specifics, but would rather save that just because of where we are in the process. Specifics being specific things, ideas for changes to zoning maps or underlying, the code tables, et cetera. Would rather we kept those until the end or kept those for our next meeting, since we are so early and we haven't seen the results of this survey yet. Mila, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You may need me to continue to share my screen. We have some examples of some other small area plans that were included in the packet that was sent out yesterday evening, just to kind of see what that very high level plan might look like versus a more detailed plan. And again, thinking about what do you all need in order to make effective decisions on behalf of your constituents related to applications in this area, and considering the fact that there may be a more comprehensive general planning process in which we could come back and revisit this in the years ahead.
Yeah, so I think if you saw the essential elements of a small area plan, that's really what we're talking about. And so I think for this meeting, it might be good to, one, confirm with council that our defined geographic boundaries are appropriate and are what you would envision for this small area plan. Two, it would be good, I think, to begin the discussion on the vision, just general. And again, that will evolve, I think, as public comment comes through. So those are the really overarching things. Then the goals are the next part of a small area plan, and that is more specific than a vision, right? So the vision is the theme, and then the goals are how that's expressed. And then the means to make that happen are using our zones or our use standards. And then beyond that, we can get further down into design standards and visual elements. And that all depends on, what kind of plan we're interested in creating. So like we said, we aren't getting outside consultants. We're not spending a lot of time on this. I am anticipating that this won't be one of the 40-page detailed plans that you've seen as an example in the packet. However, on the opposite side, we have a possible one-page plan if you saw the Ketchum downtown framework. So that's an example of really just a vision plan, and that's an option. One of the biggest things to keep in mind is that, we do have zones in Grand County, and they do allow for quite a big diversity of uses. We can just use the zones that we have. That's fine. We can, you don't have to change anything, to be honest. You can leave it exactly as it is, and our small area plan can say that this is exactly what we want the area to look like. It's good. We can also apply some of the zones that we have already that aren't in that area to that area. We can also modify some of the zones that we have, and Planning Commission has been talking a little bit about that already in a larger context. We can also craft a new zone. There could be, maybe the solution is to, put all the things together that you want to see here and have one zone for this area. That's a possibility. There aren't that many private parcels, as we know, so it's not going to probably be super complicated. Some of them are already developed, some of them are not. I think the biggest thing that we want to have is a cohesive vision, so that really when we get these applications in front of us, and obviously we're getting a lot more right now, there's some really good guidance, and we have something against which to compare those as this is our vision, this is what we want to see here, how does this application meet that vision? And of course, it also indicates to applicants what the Planning Commission and the County Council want to see in that area. And I think that's one of our most important things with this plan, is that communication. And I think that's what we've heard from applicants has been lacking, is just some kind of idea of what the council would like to see. So with that said, I think we really need to make sure that we get a good vision figured out, and what that means to everybody, and be able to agree on that, and then figure out what the goals are and see if the zones that we already have can be used, or see if we actually need to create something new.
Can I interject something about
Mhm.
what you were just saying? You know, there is an existing zone, the resort special zone, that was, you know, designed for this area. And it does contain some vision statements, which, you know, perhaps would need to be modified. I think the reason some of us have felt that we need additional planning in this area is that the actual use table and standards for the result special zone don't match the vision. And so I guess my hope in this process is that we definitely, you know, that's the part that needs the most attention, is the detailed standards and the use table. I think the vision, you know, probably hasn't changed that much in the past 10 years. And I would hope that we wouldn't spend too much time on that. I think also, you know, given our narrow time frame, you know, I just wonder if we could sort of focus our energies on the things that are really going to matter, you know, when particular applications come up. And again, that's the things like the use table and the specific standards.
Sure. I think a thing to keep in mind, though, is that some of these zones do allow for a lot of uses. So
Yeah.
we do want to have some kind of guidance as far as what kinds of uses we'd really like to see there.
But again, if there's this one zone that's designed for this area, that would be the guideline. I mean, I think traditionally, with only the one small exception, you know, all this stuff was originally raging grazing, and then it's been piecemeal rezoned to the resort special. And I think that makes sense because all the parcels are close to each other. So
let's park that as a question to come back to get guidance from council on. If it's possible in the background, Mila, could you pull up the original vision statement or from that planning process, just so we can look at that? Related to geographic boundaries, I mean, that's the easiest place to start.
Where did this green line come from? Like the western boundary, is that what's that interface that the green line's laying on?
It came from Emily.
Well, it came from a conversation during the planning commission meeting. And go ahead, Kevin.
But the western boundary is supposed to be just a half mile from the highway.
Okay, so it's just a half mile from the highway. It's not cliff base or private, public.
Nope.
Okay. So it currently includes public land?
It does. I mean, we weren't sure whether that, you know, we definitely wanted to include some of the state parcels because they can go private.
Yeah.
And I think
then,
it doesn't matter that much whether it includes BLM land. It's not going to have any effect there.
And what about around the airport? Does that consider future expansions, the reroute of Blue Hills Road, et cetera?
No, I don't.
We use the airport as a northern boundary to just sort of give us a geographic perimeter, and drew around, so half a mile to the west of the highway or to the outer boundary of any adjacent parcels, and then the ones to the east are a little bit more self-explanatory. We have not gotten to that depth of analysis yet at the time that this was drawn. So if that's something that you would like to see us consider specifically, that's the kind of thing we really want to call out in this meeting.
No, I didn't catch the half mile from the road, and so it just seemed like an arbitrary line to me, and which, you know, could work. I don't know if like the cliff base or the cliff rim might make sense through there, but I think that there, you know, we have changes to the airport planned over the next decades, and yeah, I think it has to stop north someplace. But I'm not sure if there's private land that could potentially be developed in those kind of northern badlands. But and then even the eastern border, I was kind of confused of what some of those polygons were. But I think that it's good. I was just concerned about having random little checkerboard things that were somehow, you know, exempt or didn't fit with the neighboring, like some of these gaps between what I assume is the park and where this green line falls on the eastern side.
Evan, just to quickly explain the reasoning process with this, the main thing we discussed at the Planning Commission was how far north and south it should extend. And I think the consensus was because of our limited time, we did not want to go further north than this up to near I-70. And we also did not want to go further. That was one of the big considerations. And then once we settle on this middle zone in 191, the intention was to include all the private parcels, all the SITLA parcels. We threw in state sovereign lands. And then that half-mile buffer, that did not get a lot of discussion. If you'd really like to see it be a cliff face or something else, I don't think
No,
any.
that's, and so this this southern little jog across 191, that's where that Handlebar Ranch application was?
Are you referring to this
No,
area?
the darker purple on the east side of 191.
This area?
Yep.
There's a few things in this area. I don't know, Mila, if you want to just grab the annotation tool and just sort of eyeball, if you can, perhaps more accurately than I can try, to just identify some of the landmarks.
I don't know that I would be, I don't think I can do that.
If that Handlebar Ranch was a proposal for something on SITLA land, then it would be, we've included all the SITLA land in the vicinity.
So related to boundaries, so there's two questions. You know, this is our recommendation, I guess, implying a northern boundary and a general geographic boundary. The thinking about the orange square between the green line and the park was it's so far removed from the highway that it's, you know, sort of irrelevant to the intent of this process. But there is the question of whether going up to, I don't want to misspeak, but like the Dalton Wells area, I guess there's some parcels there. And we opted to go further south, thinking that that was more closely related to like a Crescent Junction study. We also heard from county council members that thinking about this as sort of the gateway to Moab would be one guiding model for us to use in our planning process, and that this was the area that this northern boundary was the most reasonable to associate there. That said, we want to make sure that we're aligned to you so that doesn't come up as a gotcha later. So if you'd like us to consider looking into that northern boundary, if you want to discuss it as a body and give us some direction, that would be wonderful.
And
No, I was more just trying to wrap my head around some of the why. I think it's a good starting place. If anything, I would even kind of simplify it so it wasn't a stair-step zigzaggy, but you guys have obviously put more thought into I have since receiving it last night.
What's the question on that chunk of SITLA? What is the light blue sandwich in between the SITLA there on the east side of 191?
Those are state sovereign lands.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so as far as like the SITLA land, I mean, what's the thought process behind zoning SITLA land?
So often they auction off parcels and they become private later.
Yeah, but I mean, SITLA is also established an exemption from local land use, also local zoning.
But frequently they say that, you know, they try not to be completely independent.
I think we should be careful here not to confound zoning and a plan. We aren't zoning these properties, at least that's not what's being contemplated right now. We're just creating a vision plan for this area.
Okay.
So that plan can include a much larger geographic boundary than any zoning may or may not include.
Okay.
And then I also wanted to mention, I did look up the North Corridor Gateway Plan. So Kevin was mentioning that resort special zone is created for this area. So the North Corridor Gateway Plan is from 2001. So that's almost 20 years old. And it actually is only from Arches to the city of Moab. So the resort special zone was not ever intended to include this area. there has not been a plan for this particular area of the gateway. I think probably because it wasn't considered that anything would move this far north back in 2001. So that resort special zone is meant to be between Arches and Moab.
I disagree with that. I think it's the resort commercial zone that's intended to be between Arches and the river bridge, and that's where it's found. And the resort special zone is only.
That's what our code says.
Okay, well,
So maybe that's changed in the meantime, but the resort special says it's supposed to be for the 191 North Corridor area plan, which is between Arches and Moab. But it's clearly interpreted to move north. So, you know, we've been applying a zone that was intended to be closer to the city to parcels that are already further out from the city.
So going down that checklist of things that we want to capture as far as the essential elements, it sounds like at this point there's general consensus that this is a good starting place for the boundaries. I want to just touch on this vision without going too deep. We don't want to try and create a vision statement in this call, but I'd love to capture from you all if there are specific intense, specific sort of feelings, things. We heard Gateway to Moab come up. We heard it's the first place people go when they enter our town from the north. Honestly, just a little bit of popcorn style, I think could be most beneficial here. And we can just take notes and then use that to draft something to bring back to you all. Are there things that come to mind about this area that you feel we should be considering in crafting our vision statement? We don't have to spend too much time here, but just.
Yeah, could I ask a question here?
Mhm.
Yeah, what is the current zoning for that area? What does that mean?
So we have a current zone map included in the packet. You can see resort special is this lighter pink. There's
Okay.
one parcel of highway commercial, and then there is generally range and grazing elsewhere, and
Okay.
that's that outline in the pink.
Okay, so currently what we have up there, we got Moab Giants, which is, how would you define Moab Giants? Commercial?
Definitely commercial.
Okay, so we got Moab Giants, and then we've got Moab under canvas, which is overnight accommodations. Okay, is that all we've got up there? Right? Oh yeah, then there's a camping area west of Moab Giants, right?
Arches Hideaway. And then
Yeah.
there's also the 7 Mile campground, which is that campground that's right across from Bar M.
Okay, right. Okay, so right now, what I've seen is that the people that want to develop up there want to put in more overnight accommodations, right?
Well, you also have an application coming before you soon for small lot residential.
Yeah.
And some mixed use development. So there's also, there has been applications that included light commercial.
Restaurants and stuff. And that was that Numasta area.
Namaste Rock. Yep. And that's right near Moab under canvas. It's one of those more.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, there's that group. And then there's then there was the group that wanted to do the RV camping.
That's right on the highway.
And right on the highway.
And we're actually approving we've approved a site plan for a wedding venue that will be up 191, up 7 Mile Canyon.
Okay. So both of those additional proposed developments, they don't fit with the current zoning?
There are no by right overnight accommodations. So those don't fit with any current zoning. That's a legislative approval.
Right.
And the rezone request is currently just a rezone request. So that project wouldn't come to fruition unless that property was rezoned because it's currently range and grazing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. When we did that, what was it, a year or so ago, The only other areas that we're able to do overnight accommodations would be Cisco, Thompson, and Crescent Junction, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just jump in and answer the question, hopefully you asked. It's, I mean, we have some, this morning I went on a sunrise coffee hike and looked around from Poison Spider Mesa and said, my gosh, we have some of the most stunning landscape of anywhere. And so my vision is to preserve that vision. And any development there, I would want it to not detract from that. I know that's a hard order to fill. I have heard, have read comments about the Moab under canvas. I've always actually thought that's a very well done resort. It is, if you look, it's visible from the highway, but it is not obtrusive upon your vision. So I, you know, whether or not we have overnight accommodations there in, well, first of all, we don't need more overnight accommodations such as hotels and motels. One could argue that we could use some more trailer RV type parks. I do think it's going to be hard to screen that and make that so it's not, so it doesn't intrude on your vision too much as you're driving into town. I think that's my number one goal, is to preserve the beautiful landscape vision that we have within reason. Done.
And by vision, viewscape. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
So view shed, viewscape, that's something we've heard from County Council, okay?
Yeah, I would second that. You know, the town of Moab was obviously around before the national parks. But, you know, I think for the most part, we have a pretty fresh slate up there. And that really is an entrance for people visiting iSky and Dead Horse, and they may not even make it down into Moab. And so I think that to Jay Lynn's point of protecting that awe and wonder as people travel through there is high on my list. I think that there probably is some appropriate development out there, but, you know, having some of those aesthetic standards in place would be beneficial. And to Curtis's point, I think that a lot of the community would not be psyched to see some of the things that are currently allowed under our current zoning to happen out there. You know, the things like the truck stops and the fast food chains and things like that. It's kind of a lot of feedback that we've gotten. And I'm not going to have a lot of clear answers. I'm really looking to the community to guide this. And I really just wanted to create the space for it to happen. So I don't want to get too bogged down in what the council wants. And I want to try to get right to what the community wants, because I'm just trying to be a conduit for them.
So generally what I hear from you, Evan, is I heard you say it's an entrance point, which echoes this gateway concept, that maybe there's something to this being in its own encapsulation of something special that's sort of related to, but possibly separate from the downtown Moab experience, and looking at being intentional and mindful about looking at the specific underlying uses allowed in the zones that exist or potential zones that we might recommend to change to reflect that.
Yeah, and I would, you know, echo the idea that you know, there probably is some appropriate accommodations, possibly housing, you know, other tourist services, traveler services, you know, maybe a second service station, gas station, you know, to go with the one that's already out there. But that there's some protections in place that, you know, to Jay Lynn's point, it's not like, you know, you've been driving for hours through this landscape, and then you finally get to like these cliffs and you're like, oh my God, this is beautiful. And you don't want this kind of eyesore that could potentially be there. And I think that we've seen lots of examples across the West of places where they've done it well. And I really appreciate some of these inclusions here from Park City and Ketchum and Jackson. And I think that there's with a proper plan, we can create our Moab vision. And I hope that the community comes together to do that. And it's not just us talking heads on a Zoom screen.
Nope, this is giving us good guidance for what to listen for and to help us, see trends where
Ease
they
out.
exist.
Pull it out.
I just like to make a comment here. I mean, it could be argued that what is there right now detracts from the view coming into town, coming into the area. So we need to keep that in mind, that this is not a pristine area by any stretch of the imagination. We got mining roads all over the place out there. We got a gas station now. We got Moab Giants out there now. We've got different overnight accommodations there now. So, we need to keep that there too, is that this is not raw virgin land here at all.
Quick time check, Mary, it's 2:50. We'd really love to be able to walk through at a high level the survey just to talk about some specific uses, and there's some proxy models in there, but I wasn't sure if we wanted to end at 3 or if we could go to 3:30 with your schedule.
I think we were planning on, we wanted to have at least a half hour before the regular meeting. So when we planned this, I think we were planning an hour and a half.
Cool.
Wasn't it around an hour and a half for each workshop?
Okay, perfect.
So they
Is
could
that-
probably go till 3:15 maybe,
Yeah, 3:15, 3:20. Yes,
because we do have the canvassing of the elections to
that's
do.
been done.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was on time. What happened to that?
That was at,
You weren't
it was
here.
at 1:50. It was at 1:50.
Ah, okay, my
So the
bad.
canvas, you
Oh.
will be getting a email to sign that you accept the canvas. So yes, I would like you to move forward with what you had planned to give us a better idea of how you're looking at moving forward with creating this plan. So yes, go ahead, Emily.
And if I could just add my comment to the last popcorn that we
Yes.
just had very briefly. I would just second what Jalen and Evan said, but also just more specifically, limiting the idea that the city of Moab is sprawling up the highway to that area, and that it's becoming kind of an extension of the town. Obviously, there's a very limited amount of development that can come that some section of the highway between there. But yeah, just when you drop down into town and then you see town, but otherwise you feel more or less like you're out in the open. And also there was some language in one of the plans in the packet. I can't remember if it was if it was Park City, but there was some language that referred specifically to development that prioritized open landscape over the built form. And I thought that was really effective language that could be applied to this scenario.
Thank you, Gabriel. Anyone else? Go ahead. Go ahead. Doesn't look like anybody else wants to talk. Thank you. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you, Mary. So I'm going to share my screen again and take us through the survey. What I don't want to do is ask everybody to take the survey right now, but let's use it as a construct for the different approaches, different models. And I also want to keep in mind that scoping question. So with examples of Ketchum being that one pager, very high level or very detailed, would really like to come out of this call with a sense of where you all sit on that scale of what's necessary in order to capture intent. Out of curiosity, Mary, I heard you mention that you've taken this survey. Have any other council members taken the survey in full?
Yes, I
Or
have.
what?
Gabriel has.
And Jalen? It's about half and half.
When did you put it out?
We just
think-
released it a couple of days ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been swamped, so I haven't seen it.
I just took the survey today.
I sent it out to council, I believe, late last night.
Well, I definitely haven't seen it.
That's fine. So I just wanted to gauge everyone's familiarity with it. So the two that I would love to focus on are these first two. And then if we have time to go into, I think the final question or the penultimate question, just for a really quick kind of gut feel straw poll type approach. So first question, overall level of development. These three options are not concrete. They're not exact, but they offer a scale, a sliding scale, I guess, of how we might be thinking about this area. So on the one hand, you have minimal future development, current undeveloped parcels, key phrase, will remain as zones, which is this, what you saw on that map before, a few resort special, one highway commercial, and the rest range and grazing. There is this sort of follow the status quo of what has been happening recently. So let them develop similarly. We have this very sort of strong node there at the intersection. And then of course, there is a much more robust, many different options, combination of mixed use, which very likely would include at least changing to some use tables, possible zone changes, adding a new zone, some of those different toolings that Mila mentioned at the top. Don't want to go too much. Go ahead.
I'd just like to comment here that people need to understand what is actually developable out there, and that's private land. Most of what people see out there is either BLM or SITLA or other types of state land. There's very little private land. So what private land out there is about the only thing that is developable with the exception of SITLA and sovereign lands. So most of that still is not going to ever be developed, the stuff that's on the BLM side.
The only thing to remember about that is that the private land is what's on the highway.
Right.
The most visible.
Right.
And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Greg.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. Okay.
I think that this first question is a little confusing for me because the first two answers, the minimal future development and future development similar, and I guess even really the enhanced future development are all kind of like currently allowed. And so, I mean, I don't think any of us are talking about, well, there's, currently undeveloped parcels will remain as they're currently zoned. But if they remain as they are currently zoned, they could potentially develop similarly to adjacent parcels, and they could potentially develop drive-throughs and retail business types. So,
So the original form of that question was undeveloped parcels would remain as range and grazing because that's what most of the undeveloped parcels are. And then it was pointed out to us that there are a few undeveloped resort special zones. So the
right, and
pattern
the
of
resort special can have the drive-through restaurants, correct?
No, it can't. That's resort commercial.
Okay.
So, yeah, so one thing that we also should remember here is if we do check the use table, a number of those uses are also conditional uses, which are legislative. So,
Okay.
Having this plan will help guide even what's already zoned. If we decide to keep the zones as they are, will help guide those decisions. but there are no drive-through restaurants allowed in resort special.
Okay. I guess that it might be a good starting question, but you know, to your kind of question of like, what do you see the vision of this area? I don't know if this is really capturing it. You know, it's kind of like, it's kind of asking, hey, what zoning do you want to see? And I think when we blast this out to the general public, you know, they might not be as familiar with what these range and grazing, resort special, highway commercial, because, you know, they might not think the pair resorts and highway commercial with minimal future development, if that makes sense. So I know we kind of get into some of the vision questions later, but you know, a lot of these surveys, you know, it's kind of like you start with like the number one takeaway you want to get from it. And so I might start with a even broader, like, what is your vision for this area? And you can ask if they're, you know, kind of to Jaylen's point, or if it's more of like, hey, this is a great place for truck stops because it's out of town and that kind of stuff. Or, you know, this is a great place to build 5-story hotels and keep the tourists out of downtown, or like, and really, because what I'm looking for is guidance from the community of what their vision of this area is. And I think the nuanced zoning questions are kind of jumping the gun. And I think we want to, the survey should start with that really high question from 10,000 feet to establish some of that vision.
So just to explain a little bit more about what the first question was intending to ask, I think that the status quo has been that people give us zoning requests for a zoning change out there, like for example, from range and grazing to resort special, and those have typically been granted in the past. And so that's sort of what the middle option was meaning to capture without using too much technical language. The first option is supposed to be like, well, no, you're stuck with whatever zoning you have, and you know, if it's range and grazing, that's what it's going to stay. That's not what's been happening. And then in addition to that, some people have been asking things that go beyond, you know, the typical past zoning changes, asking for drive-through restaurants and denser housing. And so those were sort of the three options we were allowed, and we can either stay the course or sort of put on the brakes or hit the accelerator. That's what these three things were supposed to capture.
Great. That was a great summary. Did anybody write that down? Because I think that's what the question should say.
So, okay, so we can add, we can separate responses we've gotten so far, which is a small number, and then anything moving forward, and we can add a first question to describe your vision. And we can relook at this question 1 to be more concrete about what we're trying to get from the community by asking this. That's really great feedback. And I know that, Evan, you've mentioned, you know, going too far into the details until you've gotten significant public input is not something you want to do. But I think it is worth just, there's been some conversation so far about things that may or may not belong here based off of past community input, based off of past planning processes. This is a list of common uses for the existing zones and requests we've gotten. So is there anything on here that you feel very strongly for or against for this area, or that make you think about the ways we should be getting this kind of input from the community that we can take with us to go and act on?
I think this is
a question about housing. I was actually surprised to see housing on the first portion of the survey. And I mean, this is just not an area, I guess, that I've ever, you know, anticipated or considered residential value. I would like to hear kind of some thoughts on that, you know, and you know what's behind that, and what rationale was provided to kind of include that. Because I mean, right now we're talking about what development exists right now is very commercial.
Those were the applications that we got that wanted the high density housing overlay applied to them.
Yeah, that's a quick answer. We've been getting variations on various sorts of high density housing, asking them. That's the only reason I think it's on there.
In the
that was specifically New Master Rock area.
Oh, okay.
And
I guess I would.
resort special does allow for single family housing. So that is, and highway commercial also allows for pretty dense housing.
Is
Highway
this
commercial
something that,
any type of housing.
I mean, is this something that members of the planning commission or the county council is interested in? I mean, are there members of the group here in this discussion that feel like there's residential potential or that it's appropriate?
I think that that's appropriate to include in the survey. I think if people are saying, yeah, we need all the housing we can get, and if a developer can figure out how to make it work there, then great. I wouldn't want to be the guy to figure out how to make it work there, but if that's what the public's pushing for, then great. If the public's not supportive of it, I'm not going to be the one to push for it.
My guess, Curtis, is that most members of the Planning Commission are not supportive of denser housing than, say, the residential resort special district allows. But the goal of the survey was to have everyone with an interest, with an opinion on this area. They should be able to find somewhere on their survey a way to express that opinion. And we know that some of the landowners would like to develop housing, and so that's why the option's on there. So,
I would, I think some things that might be missing is just feedback on like some kind of non-tourist sort of things. I don't know if it would be appropriate for a gravel pit out there. We have like one kind of catch-all of industrial uses, but maybe something like light manufacturing. I think that there's a lot of other potential that somebody might come along that right now might seem so out of place to us that it's not even on our radar, but it might be worth asking so that we get feedback about that. So that we've got this in the plan from the get-go and we're not scrambling later.
What about what other commercial aspects that would be kind of coordinate with the airport could we include in there?
Yeah, the airport and the rail is there too. I think shipping things, I think, maybe some lodging close to the airport. I think you're right that we should kind of ask a lot of those questions of typical airport zones of manufacturing, industrial, other tourist services.
And this is
Evan?
starting to capture, go ahead.
Yep. Yeah. When Judd was here, the last airport manager, I asked him about that, and he said that the airport has land that abuts the railroad, which would be easy. Well, nothing's easy, but it would be possible to put a spur there so that people could ship out of there by rail.
That
all I got.
Property.
This is leading me to hear that the council might be more interested in sort of a higher level but less discrete approach to this, less specific approach to this. Given some of the different uses that you're talking about related to existing development. So for example, a vision that said we would be in support of shipping and potentially some overnight accommodations that are directly related to the airport or to the rail services in the area. That's a very different approach than let's create a new underlying zone category for this region that includes these uses, and they may be in tension. And then you have somebody who says, hey, I want to build a hotel here, even if it's not by the airport. So I'm calling this back to you all. How do you feel about that approach? If we were to take a more high level visionary approach and really kind of get at the intent of the character of the area versus specific uses, versus that very, very specific looking at individual line item uses, underlying zones, et cetera, where do you all fall on that scale?
I think starting with a high level vision is appropriate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really liked, I like the approach, not necessarily the survey, but of looking at new zones and going in and kind of defining, those zones and those land uses. And I think if we took a more generalized approach to the specific permitted uses in the survey, that would kind of help us establish a foundation to go in and then identify where those uses would be the most appropriate according to their location, in the subsequent zone.
Identify specific uses. Are you suggesting like ask the citizens to say this use in this place? Is that the level of granularity you're trying to get at? Could you restate that? I wasn't totally clear.
I think for purposes of the survey, being more general and high level would be best. But I think ultimately, I think the point I was making was I like the approach of potentially establishing some new zoning for some of these areas in the plan. And I think that getting down into the weeds on specific uses for purposes of the survey isn't particularly helpful, just because there's a lot of land there, and there's a lot of varying uses that could be more appropriate for certain areas and not in others, right? So when we're talking about industrial stuff, some of the things that Evan just mentioned as far as rail, that's going to be more appropriate for the areas closer to the airport, not so much the 313 junction. And so getting down in the weeds on specific uses in the survey, I think, is probably a little bit, a little too much too soon, was my point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting trade-off between being a very open funnel at this point and then using that to create different options, put those up on the website to solicit comments, which is, I think, where we'd like to go with this process, is actually hand back, okay, well, based off of what we hear, here's 4 different options, leave comments for each of these and overall, so we can start to get to a more narrow community vision, and then use that to get to that final draft for public hearing. So that's the process as I understand it. I will say though, and we don't have to get all of this information from you on this call, but as you digest this workshop and you go back and you look at the survey, if there are things that you think should be on that list or shouldn't, if you have specific questions you like added, what we don't want to do is create lots of changes, but it's early on that if you could get that to us by tomorrow, we could make one round of updates and make sure we're being more specific, I guess.
So can I just ask you a quick question? So it sounds like we're possibly contemplating a new zone or some modification of an existing zone for the area around the airport, and then potentially a different zone or modification of an existing zone for the area around 313 and 191. Is that generally what I'm hearing from most people?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So we can move forward with that as an idea, and we can put that into the survey and on the website and see if we can flesh out a little bit better what that might look like. I think that's really wise. I think that makes a lot of sense to have that zone around the airport be different. And I think that's one of the challenges that we've had with the zoning so far, is that we want to see different things in different places, but we just are using one blanket zone to be able to make those decisions. And it doesn't allow us to be, sort of as fine-grained as that to be able to even fit into the vision that we're talking about. So I'll move forward with that and see if we can adjust the survey and make the website a little bit clearer, and see if we can get comments on what those two might look like.
Maybe, I don't know if it's easier, but maybe we just move that northern border to exclude the airport. Just kind of like bump it down a little further.
We could do that. And then would that mean that we're not including the airport in our planning effort?
Well, if everybody's kind of saying, hey, these are 2 separate things already, in the interest of time, maybe we just like bang out the 313 gateway sort of question, and then circle back around to like the, potential industry, economic diversification, manufacturing kind of stuff, and say that, hey, the airport is not this beautiful thing we're trying to protect. The airport is a potential for, you know, diversifying the economy. It's an economic driver. That's a separate beast, and just carve it out right now. But maybe that's a question for the survey. Should the airport be included, or is that a separate beast?
Well,
I
you
could-
could,
We haven't had
you
a
could-
lot of proposals near the airport, and so I think, I agree with Evan that leaving it out is probably the most expeditious thing to do. We
I
can
think
always,
what I would like to see is to take the airport out, but rather than having the desire for development push the planning process, say that for 2021, we want to develop a plan for the airport area all the way to highway, I-70. Because I think I see that as being developed in a more similar way than the area around 313. So that I would agree with Evan. I think that's a good idea. And what you're wanting to see in the 313 area is a protection of the view shed, making sure it doesn't look like sprawl, that we protect the beauty of the area, I think is a high priority for many people. While that would not be the same high priority for from the airport to I-70.
So Mary, it sounds like you would fall toward just setting that northern boundary below it versus trying to get comment about it and then including some comment around setting it aside from the rest of the planning.
Yes, and I think I would like, because I agree with Curtis, I like the idea that we do the planning before the pressure to do the planning happens because people are interested in applying for development. I would like, to be ahead of the game this time as opposed to catching up.
I will just
Emily?
mention that there are a couple, I've had a couple conversations about properties out by the airport or development out by the airport. So I don't think that we can avoid it for too long.
I would like to see it be the goal for in 2021, maybe the first part of 2021. When we finish this planning process, we should start looking at that planning process.
Emily, this is going back to the topic we just had before we got on the airport, which is I would not like to lose the specific list of questions because some people think from a high level and other people think very specific. Do I want to see a gas station? Do I want to see a truck stop? Do I want to see high density housing or whatever? So I don't want to lose that. You can get a whole hunk of people's visions by the things that they check off of such a list.
What I'm hearing from council is getting context is very important and making sure we're being clear about why we're asking that question. And Mila made a great point that, with your direction, we're already in a position to start getting draft ideas out on the website so that content is specific to something real and not hypotheticals. So I think that's a great call out, Bob. And my gauge from the county council is that y'all are comfortable with that approach as well. Being respectful of time, Kevin, I know you wanted to say something. I'd love just planning commissioners, if you have any final questions or thoughts, and then would love to just get last words from council members so we can wrap hopefully at 3:25, 2026.
okay, my final thought. This is similar to what Obi was saying, but I do think it's worth asking about specifics. And an additional reason is I think one of the things that cause this whole planning process to happen is there are people who own parcels out near 313 that are currently zoned range and grazing, and they come and they ask for an upzone to, for example, resort special. And many people, including many people on the planning commission, have been reluctant to grant that upzone because they think that the resort special zone as currently written doesn't do enough to protect the visual resources. So that's like, we don't have a zone that would control development in the way we would like to up there. And I think with the small area plan, we could either create a new zone or make changes to the resort special zone so that people would feel more comfortable doing this upzone from ranging grazing to whatever the new zone is called. And that new zone, the main decisions are just a use table and standards. and getting public input on those directly as opposed to some kind of overall vision, I think could be very useful in the planning process.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify some of my comments kind of on the front end of this meeting, in that I was under the, I had a
You're kind of
misunderstanding.
muffled there, Kurt.
What's that?
You're hard
You're
to hear.
hard to
Now
hear.
you're good.
I was misunderstanding that, that one particular application was asking for an up zone. My understanding was that, the underlying base zone, more or less allowed for the use that he's targeting. So, I mean, if folks are coming forward and they're asking for up zone, or they're asking for zoning changes, not to discredit the reasoning here, it's clear that there's demand and people are really coming to the table. So I think if we can just be as efficient and reasonable as possible, hopefully we can end up in a good place with some of these folks.
Yeah, and on that note, I think that just like there's some specific questions about what type of accommodations would people like to see or would be okay with seeing, possibly some, whether in this version or in the future, something similar about housing. We've kind of made housing a priority, and if a developer feels like they can pull that off in that area, I would like some feedback from citizens about, whether it is that really rural sort of feel, or if they could envision less visually impacting, lower or high density on the west side of the highway, east side, or something like that. Some feedback in regards to what style or type of housing would be beneficial for me as well, because I don't want to take that completely off the table either.
I've got just a quick question for Emily or the Planning Commission. One of the big points that's been raised about at least one of those applications that we received, like on the base of 313 191 junction, was that SITLA section that is, I think it's SITLA and some of that sovereign lands that's off of Dalton Wells, has become just a major, just dispersed camping area. And I mean, just like sea of motorhomes and campers, and the displacement of the folks that have been utilizing that for a camping space has been used as kind of a justification for having some, campground and RV developments on some of the private land in that area. Have you guys kind of discussed that circumstance in any detail and kind of factored that into your discussions? And what are your thoughts on that?
That is definitely something that has come up in discussions for the Planning Commission for more than one application, and opinion tends to be split. There is a favor on the commission toward not using that as a justification for overnight accommodations, as far as how we've then gauged our recommendations to County Council. Alongside that question of potential ecological damage and just general viewshed effect is a question about traffic as well. If you have a lot of people staying in that area, is it better to send them into town to go to restaurants and the grocery store, or would that also support a small amount of commercial development intended for retail purchases and restaurants and so on? It's not something that I think there's any consensus on, but there has been a bias towards recommending that is not a justification for development. That is one of the things that I think stands behind the catalyst for doing this plan, because we want to know from that's a pretty sharp trade-off. Are we more comfortable with that potential harm versus the potential harm of having an established RV park? And there's always the question of, if you build it, do more come? So I guess there isn't an answer that we have found, and I can't even say that we've found significant on that particular question. I haven't seen, a specific theme in community involvement, but it's definitely something we should be asking about in our public hearing or public meeting settings as we go deeper into this process. It's 3:23. I just want to be mindful of ending on time. So I want to make sure, Curtis, that I answered your question effectively. Mary, I'll give you the last word to kind of gauge how much additional input from the county council, and then we'll sign off with a big thank you.
Curtis, did she answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I would like to, in the future, kind of drill into that more, you know, with the planning commission and kind of understand some of that logic. But yeah, she answered the question.
And just one last note on that, we have another workshop scheduled for a month from now-ish. And so by then we will have a lot more community input. We will have some, if not sort of one guiding direction, we see at least a few options we can use, and we can go deeper on those. So we'll keep a running list of things that we want to make sure we touch on then.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the council?
Just one other little thing that I have that I can't help but think about in the future after this plan is developed, or as we, you know, develop this plan and what, you know, may or may not, you know, be a part of the vision. There's going to be inevitably more and more reasons to get on and off the highway in that section. And I wonder when and if it would be wise or appropriate to like consult with UDOT, because it's not a fun section of highway to turn off of or turn onto. And I mean, you know, when and where would there need to be a stoplight eventually, and would that even be permissible? You know, those are things that I'm not sure about, but it certainly comes up in my head a lot.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Mila. And we will sign off and be back at 4 o'clock.
Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.